that being said, how are telcos redeeming themselves? Well, Volkan, let's hear it from a telco itself, from Telefónica actually. Jesus Romero, head of corporate strategy of Telefónica, is joining us on stage right now. And of course, we are dying to hear from your perspective.
Thank you very much for the introduction and the invitation. Let me start with a presentation where we give you the strategy view of how we see the sector. So if you look at our presentation, we're going to give you three key messages. We're going to look at the industry from a customer point of view, and we're going to look at the value chain, so you understand the different roles the different players are going to play. We're going to talk about convergence and what that means for network strategy, and then we're going to talk about what we think is the winning strategy from a telco point of view. So let me start with the basics. What really matters here, and the only thing we know for sure going forward, is that the customer will win. The customer will win because they will get more services for a lower value, or potentially they will invest more money or spend more money on a monthly basis, but they will do a lot more things that they're doing today. And that is basically done with three steps. They have a supercomputer on their pocket, and this is becoming a more sophisticated gadget, either a tablet, a smartphone, or a PC. Connectivity, as the previous speaker said, is evolving very quickly, and the speed and the capacity of the networks is improving dramatically. And then you have probably the most exciting part, the most sexy part. This is what people get excited about, which is all the innovation we're seeing. A massive amount of services, and this is great, but all three buckets have to work together for the customer experience to be really fantastic. And from an economical point of view, think about global GDP. These three buckets combined are growing faster than global GDP, so this is a very exciting industry to be in. We're winning market share of global GDP every year. I'll give you an example. This is a branding exercise that a company that looks at brands does every year. They rank the most valuable brand names globally. And this is the last year's ranking. If we looked at this chart 10 years ago, companies like Coca-Cola, McDonald's, and Marlboro would probably be right at the top. If you look at the situation today, more than half of the brands in this chart are coming from this industry. This is pretty exciting if you think about it, and you have everybody represented. You have the people in the first box, the smartphones, you have people in the connectivity area, you have 4 telcos here, and you have people in the app content bucket as well. But this is fantastic if you think about the industry as a whole. Second thing, which is very interesting when you look at the value chain, is how quickly frenemies are learning to work with each other. And I highlight this word because it's very important. There is always a very lively debate between telcos and OTTs, and we're fighting against each other. But in reality, we're frenemies. We work together for certain things. We compete in others. And I think you have some headlines here that are particularly interesting. I mean, think about Apple working with IBM or Microsoft. Probably 15 years ago, that was unheard of. I particularly like the Netflix working with Amazon for all the infrastructure needs. Think about Netflix. They compete directly with Amazon, and yet Amazon Web Services does all their infrastructure. So there is a lot of things we could learn from a telco point of view from all these companies to deal with frenemies in the future. A lot of debate this morning about GAFA. And I'll give you some numbers that people normally don't look at, but we do, because I think there is a big debate in this industry that people sometimes forget, which is sustainability. Let me give you the explanation for this page. This data is from the third quarter numbers, so we're talking beginning of July to the end of September. And this is revenue data. So if you start with Apple, they did 51 billion of revenues in 90 days. Very impressive number. That number alone is bigger than the other 3 companies combined. If you add up Amazon, Google, and Facebook, Apple is doing more in revenues than the other 3 companies combined. If you look at the iPhone alone, 32 billion in 90 days with a growth of 36%. This is a pretty spectacular number. And the iPhone alone is bigger than the other companies. But where am I going with this? What really matters from our point of view is not only the revenue and the margin, they are making a lot of money, is the sustainability and the perception people have of the future of these companies going forward. And this applies to the telcos as well. But let me give you a number that you're probably not very used to looking at, but we do with quite frequently, which is what is the multiple, the cash flow of these companies, trade at, and the higher the multiple, the more sustainability investors perceive for each of these companies. So I don't know if you've seen a number that strikes you as low, but look at Apple. I mean, we said this is the most profitable company in history, but nothing else. No other company has generated as much money in 90 days with such high profitability as Apple did in the last quarter, and yet they have an enterprise value operating free cash flow of 7. Compare that with Amazon, 40, Google, 19, Facebook, 26. Or if I ask the audience, what is the number for the telcos? Anybody want to give a number?
Anyone has a clue?
Any guesses? How about you?
I'm not going to try this one.
Depending on the company, we're somewhere in between Google and Apple, okay, 12, 13 times. So what really is the message of this page? Sustainability over the very long term really matters, and this is something we need to keep in mind as well. So when you look at the value chain, starting from a customer point of view, the customer is on the left. The customer sees the devices. These are the 100 companies we track in my team on a regular basis. You have a lot of names, but we track 100 companies. We track the first 5. These are all quoted companies, and we look at forecast and what people think these companies are going to make in the future. But if you look at devices, you have 6 companies. If you look at connectivity, we look at the 50 biggest telcos. If you look at the next component, tech, you have a lot of names, including Nokia and a lot of the other companies that will be in the audience. If you look at digital services, this is where all the innovation is taking place. A lot of companies doing very interesting things, normally global companies, platform companies, and then you have content and media. Each of these buckets have different dynamics from a business point of view and from a sustainability point of view. If you look at devices, I don't know if you've seen the headlines, but in the last 90 days, Apple had 90% of the profit of the smartphone market. 90%. There are a lot of companies competing in this market. Is that a good place to be? It's a tough place to be. Remember Motorola, Nokia, remember BlackBerry. It's difficult to maintain the edge sustainably over time, or at least that's what the perception investors have. If you look at telcos, this is a local business at the end of the day, at least for now. What really matters is what is your position in the case of Orange in the French market, or Telefónica in the Spanish or Brazilian market. And what really matters here is the network, and the quality of the network is critical. If you look at the next set of components, they have their issues as well. And if you look at digital services, we only talk about the successful companies, but remember all the companies that competed with Google, and they're not here anymore. And you have to be able to create a business globally and remain number one for a very long term. So what is the message here? What really matters when you look at value and when you look at the role of the different parts of the value chain in the sector is look at enterprise value. So if you look at the total enterprise value of these 100 companies we track, is 7 trillion euros. 7 trillion euros is a massive amount of money. This morning, everybody was talking about market cap. I would suggest don't look at market cap, look at enterprise value. That's what really tells you what the business value is, because internet companies have cash, telcos have debt. You would normally say, well, I'd rather have cash. I would as well, but why do they have cash? If you think about it, well, interest rates are very low. Why do they have cash? Because their own perception of sustainability is low, and they'll rather have cash because they don't know what will happen in the next 10 years. If they have cash, they will be able to reinvent themselves. Look at Nokia. When they were bought by Microsoft, the company had a lot of cash, but if you look at the credit rating of the company, it was junk at the time, only 18 months ago. So this is important. So if you look at the value chain, telcos account for 41% of the value chain. It's still a big number. Obviously, if you look at the growth over the last few years, digital services and other areas have been growing faster. But what really matters from our point of view when we think about sustainability is think about the capital employed, how much capital these businesses require to operate. And this is where the numbers are very different. If you look at the 3 trillion of capital employed that support 7 trillion of enterprise value, 70% of the value of this capital employed is in the telco side. And this is a positive and a negative. It's a positive because, at the end of the day, this is a barrier of entry. It's a negative because we are the ones making the big investments. And what really matters for us, from our point of view, from a sustainability point of view, is the regulators need to understand the rules of the game. We're the ones making big investments, but we need to make an attractive return on investment, because at the end of the day, all these 100 companies we're looking at are quoted, they have shareholders, and we all need to make money, or at least cover the cost of capital. So having a fair and stable regulatory framework is very important for the telco industry. If you look at these two numbers, the big deltas are, if you look at digital services, 21% of the enterprise value, only 5% of capital employed. So these are things that everybody in the sector has to understand. This has implications from a competitive point of view, but also implications from a regulatory point of view, and I think this is an important page. That was our view of the value chain and the role everybody plays in the value chain. Let me talk about telcos. Convergence is a theme, and I will give you three versions of convergence from a customer point of view. You have fixed mobile convergent strategies. Networks are combining. Value offers to customers are combining. I think the French and the Spanish market are probably very sophisticated from a convergence point of view. You have convergence of telco, internet, and media. The previous speaker talking about the Chinese video market, very exciting. It's happening very quickly. All this content is going to the web. That has very significant implications for the networks. And then you have telco and IT convergence, cloud. I think the next speaker will probably talk about this. A lot of things are happening. But if you're a telco, you need to understand these three ways of the industry converging from a customer point of view. And all of these things have implications for the network. If you remember what customers do at the end of the day with our network, I've given you here an example of the different apps that we see in the Brazilian market and in the Korean market. Why these two markets? Well, I'll give you an emerging market country, and then I'll give you a very sophisticated market from a network point of view. If you think from a customer point of view on the residential side, what they do with these apps is pretty much they want ubiquity. If you look at the y-axis, this is wireless coverage, effectively. Or they want capacity, if you're watching a video of YouTube or Netflix, whatever it is. But what you see, if you compare Brazil with Korea, is that as you sophisticate the network, and the network gives you more speed and capacity, consumers will use that capacity. There is what seems to us like an unlimited need for speed. And this is good. We're in a sector where what we do has apparently unlimited demand, but we need to be smart on how we monetize this opportunity. But this is a fact. So from our point of view, and I'm not going to get into technicalities, I think we have other experts that can talk about technicalities, but if you're a telco, what you need to know is, okay, we have 2 trillion of capital employed, a lot of it is in the network. You need to understand how the dynamics of the network are going to move going forward, and at the end of the day, you have fixed networks and mobile networks. The capacity performance of each of them are different. Wireless is catching up, but fiber is still unbeatable. Over time, new technologies like 5G will make the gap between the two smaller. But what we really need to know is what is the customer going to be doing with traffic over the long term. We haven't talked about 4K video. We haven't talked about virtual reality. We haven't talked about a lot of other things that will be invented in the next 10 years. But what we know for sure is that data will probably grow much faster than people think, and we need to be ready for that. So you have to make assumptions for things like what is the cost of carrying a gigabyte on the fixed network versus the mobile network? What is the capital employed implication for each one of them? What is the demand going to look like in 10 years? What is the competitive structure in each market? You have to make all these assumptions that people sometimes underestimate. And we all love all these applications and innovation, but remember, without the connectivity, nothing works. Okay, so these are the type of challenges that telcos have. And at the end of the day, if you wanted to look at a very simple scenario analysis, from a strategic point of view, you have a very simple chart here, where assuming you've made all your homework on customer behavior, cost per gigabyte, etc., on the right side, you have 4 potential scenarios where you could end up. If you look at the x-axis, in a country where you have very good fixed infrastructure, you could be a cable operator offering Wi-Fi and having an MVNO, you wouldn't need a mobile network. If you are on the emerging market like India or China or some of these markets where fixed line penetration is very low, it's going to be pretty much mobile, the only thing that will give you connectivity. And then if you look at the y-axis, you can have a wholesale strategy where you just sell data and you don't try to differentiate yourself. You might want to do that if you are the number 3 or number 4 operator in a particular market, or you might want to have an experience. And some of the speakers this morning were talking about the experience that is fantastic, and you can offer services beyond connectivity. So you think about each one of them, and I won't go into a lot of detail because I have a limited amount of time, but I'll give you examples. If you look at the x-axis, this is very simple. On the left, cellular networks would be the connectivity option of last resort, and this is what the cable guys are doing in the US, for example. You have a fantastic cable network, and with Wi-Fi and potentially MVNO, you offer a good service to your customer. You can have a second option, which is what we have here in France or in Spain or in Korea or in Japan, where you have a very significant amount of players that are convergent. They offer fixed and wireless. And then you have a third option, which is India or China or some of the markets we operate in Latin America, where it's pretty much going to be mobile. Fixed line is very low penetration, so you will have to offer services mainly with mobile. And then on the y-axis, you have different ways of differentiating. We are clearly going to be playing more the upper part of the chart, just because in most of our markets we have a number 1 or number 2 position in connectivity. But you have 3 basic ways of differentiating yourself. You have to offer a much better customer experience, things like channels, customer care, analytics, knowing your customer better, big improvement ahead for the telcos. Best network, you highlighted earlier, virtualization, SDN. There are a lot of things that we can do in the future to lower the cost of gigabytes and potentially carry all this traffic with lower capital employed, hopefully, over time. And then improve the operating model. A lot of things some of the OTTs in the value chain are doing, we can learn from them. They're very quick to market. We need to improve that.
And we're about to lose Mike, but go on. We're definitely losing the mic. Let me get another mic. Some technical problems. Well, actually, Volker, in the meantime, just a quick word with you. We heard about the need for speed that telcos are running for, but try not to be too fast and furious in this race.
I love that.
Just wanting to do it.
No, this is. I love the wording you chose. Need for speed. This is unlimited. That's what he really said. Absolutely. Unlimited need for speed. And what I really liked, Marjorie, is you put that in combination with customer experience. Yeah. I think this is compelling, and yet I'll have 1 or 2 more questions once we are done. Sure. Please.
Let me finish, and then the last one, operating model, big improvements ahead as well. So last page, what is the winning strategy for a telco from our point of view, looking at what is going on in the value chain? Well, at the end of the day, customer number 1, okay? That's what really matters. We need to think about a fantastic experience. And with that in mind, you have to do 4 things correctly. The first one, best access network. No debate, fiber, 5G, whatever it takes. At least in the case of Telefónica, we aspire to have the best network so our customers have a fantastic experience. Remember, the customers don't have a fixed or mobile experience. They want full connectivity. They don't care how you provide that for any situation, any use case, whatever they are. This is our core business. Number 2, we need to improve our interaction with the customer. I think we need to improve channels. We need to improve customer knowledge. A lot of things we could do. I highlight 3 points, but you have many. Number 3, going back to the frenemy point I made at the beginning, we need to learn how to deal with third parties. I think there is a big opportunity to bundle services where we enhance connectivity with services. Some of them will be Telefónica services or Orange services, but a lot of them will be third-party services. And if you bundle, you normally see a very material reduction in churn. And you have to be able to do this for the residential market and the enterprise market. And 4th, you have to do all of this with a more efficient operating model and big opportunities ahead. So that was pretty much what I wanted to say.
That's
2 minutes.
Perfect. Yeah, actually, and quick question with you, Volker.
So, Jesus, what you present truly resonates many ways. So the one key question I have for you is, so you, on this chart also, you kind of, there's this exciting piece. It says, building best digital services. So the question I have is, in how far would Telefónica, as part of your strategy, leverage what you're good at beyond connectivity into vertical sectors? And if so, how would you go about it? We've heard cooperation as a key theme earlier in some of the speeches. So is this a part of the strategy that you can elaborate on a little bit more?
I think the IBM speaker made a comment this morning that one of the things that big corporations need to do is to learn to avoid trying to do everything. No, you could potentially do everything, but the time to market might make you uncompetitive. So At the end of the day, we're going to have to prioritize capital allocation, and capital allocation right now will be allocated to priority number 1, big opportunity to increase fiber and 5G penetration, but then priority number 2 and 3 are also very important. I would say all of them you have to do at the same time. So digital services, we're doing in certain markets video, we're doing, and we have Telefónica services that work really well. We are doing things in security. I mean, in each market, we look at what is the position of Telefónica. Some of them are local services, some of them are global, but these are pretty much, from a strategic point of view, the 4 priorities. The question to answer you would be, what is the percentage you assign out of the capital we have to each one of them? Right now, connectivity takes the bigger part, but we're assigning capital to all 4.
Right.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
You're released from duty on stage.
Nice.
And
Thank you very much.